An adoption scandal that shocked the nation, a villain hiding in plain sight, and over 5,000 children whose lives would never be the same. This is Season 1, Episode 1 of Nonfiction Fridays, the series that tells unbelievable stories that really happened. In this inaugural episode, we will be talking about the Georgia Tann adoption scandal and the Tennessee Children's Home Society. This story takes place in Memphis, Tennessee, a city alongside the Mississippi River known for housing great musicians like Elvis Presley, B.B. King, and Johnny Cash. But near Midtown, there lived a different kind of celebrity. They called her Georgia Tann. Georgia Tann was born in 1891, the daughter of a prominent judge, and slowly made a career for herself through social work, eventually finding herself the executive director of the Tennessee Children's Home Society, which operated successfully from the 1920s to 1950. What you need to understand about Georgia Tann was that she was a figurehead for adoption throughout the entire country. She spoke extensively on lecture tours, preached her values to people like Eleanor Roosevelt and President Harry Truman. From the outside looking in, she was one of the top proponents for adoption and placing needy children in wonderful homes. No one ever thought to question her. But what was really going on behind the scenes at the Tennessee Children's Home Society was very different from the picture it was trying to sell. An estimated 5,000 children were black market sold through Georgia Tann's adoption ring. Sadder still, many of the adoptive families had no idea what they were supporting, what they were getting into, and the incredible repercussions all of their actions would have over the next generation and the generation to come. Georgia Tann was untouchable. People loved her. They admired her. Celebrities like Joan Crawford, Pearl S. Buck, and even the New York governor adopted Tann children. These celebrities and hundreds of average families all believed that they were giving these children a home that they needed and that they were doing a greater service to society. No one thought to question where these children were coming from, and that is where the darkness of Georgia Tann's adoption scandal starts. Unfortunately, it's not where it ends. Where exactly was Georgia Tann getting all these babies that supposedly needed homes? The truth is, the majority of these children were kidnapped, taken, or confiscated under false means. Georgia Tann would target poor families who could not fight back, often through a series of lies. Some would promise these poor families a respite, some sort of service of help. Their children would be taken away under the guise of something good and never be given back. In other cases, Georgia Tann used a local network of authority figures who served as kidnappers for her. Often they would give her tips of poor families who are in desperate times of need. For instance, if a mother of 8 was in hospital and the father was at work, children in this time era would be left at home alone, and that wasn't uncommon. Georgia Tann would be given a tip that these children were left alone. She would then drive to these houses in her black luxury Packard car, offer the children a ride, and lure them out of their homes. As far as the parents were concerned, their children had just disappeared, and they would never find them again. Another way Georgia Tann acquired babies to sell was by taking advantage of desperate mothers who were not pregnant in a socially acceptable way. In a more sinister take for acquiring newborns, Georgia Tann and her associates would sometimes tell mothers in a hospital that their baby had died during childbirth when they had not, tell the family that the body would be buried at no cost to them, and that child, who had a loving family waiting for them, would be stolen, taken into Georgia Tann's care, and if it was lucky, eventually sold to a family. They would also take advantage of new mothers when they were still under sedation and have them sign their children away. Once in the home, children were given new names, new backgrounds, and sometimes even new religions in order to make them more marketable to families. A 1951 report showed that these children were sometimes drugged to keep them quiet in the house. Older children were often used as free labor, and many children there would die from lack of medical care. In an effort to adopt these children or essentially sell them for a high price, Georgia Tann would tell all sorts of stories or create backstories for these children that, in an age of eugenics, made them seem more appealing to the average family. Children always seemed to come from attractive mothers and intelligent fathers who were always doctors. They always came from a well-off home, and there was always some reason why the child had to be given up. The children were treated as commodities by Tann. She placed ads in newspapers for them. She even made a baby catalog, and every Christmas there would be a raffle in the local paper where 20 to 30 babies would be raffled off to families after buying a simple ticket for an entry. It was called the Christmas Baby Giveaway. One of the biggest questions about Georgia Tann is, how did she get away with all of this? Well, adoption was becoming big business. While adoption wasn't that common in the decades prior to this, a few things changed in the 20s that made it more popular. First of all, it was part of a government social change. There were campaigns encouraging people to adopt. These campaigns were encouraging Americans to support their local society, support their own families, to give a loving home to a child who might need one. All admirable messages going to lots of admirable people that Georgia Tann took advantage of. Eugenics was also a very popular, trending topic at this time in history. Eugenics is something that lots of people don't talk about, and I encourage you to do a quick Google search or research it if you're not familiar with it. Essentially, it was the belief that human breeding could be made better by focusing on who bred or who reproduced. That in itself is a very sad story, but it was popular at the time, and people were buying into all of this information about what the best child was. So of course you're getting into all these parameters of what is the best child, how is that defined, and that was another thing that Georgia Tann took advantage of. Beautiful babies in their eyes, which was blonde, blue-eyed, or just pretty babies in general, could sell for a lot more than perhaps what would have been considered an average baby at that time. And Georgia Tann would be aware of this when she was seeking out children to kidnap and then sell. Another major change that even allowed adoption and a more common sense to be possible was the advent of baby formula, which meant that mothers who weren't nursing could care for a child in a healthy way without the need of a wet nurse, that it was allowing them to be independent mothers if they weren't able to do it in a natural way or didn't want to do it in a natural way. Sometimes older couples or Jewish families, because lots of adoption agencies in that era did not adopt out to Jewish families. These are all people who wanted children. These were a lot of people who were good people who just wanted children, and they thought that they were doing the right thing, and they never thought that anything out of place was in existence. These families, too, are victims of Georgia Tann, as they were put unknowingly into this turmoil. Once these new parents had their adopted children, Tann was not against blackmailing them. She would make up excuses or reasons why she needed more money. She would sometimes lie and say that the family had come back for the child and that if they paid a small legal fee, she would be able to make the problem go away so that they could keep this child that they've had for years now and grown attached to and obviously love. She would also make all sorts of excuses to charge more money. Everything from traveling fees, nurse fees, just anything she could think of, and Tann would profit a large amount of that adoption fee. The adoption fee in Tennessee was quite low, but we know that Tann would take advantage of these parents and her prime stock and how she marketed and sold these babies as commodities. We know that in one case she made at least $2,700 off of one child. In today's money, that's about $40,000. With an estimated 5,000 children going through the Tennessee Children's Home Society's doors, you can imagine the amount that Tann might have made, which is an estimated $1 million or $11 million in today's money. Because she was making such money from all of this meant she had a lot of local people in her pocket. Lots of people who are making money off of this business, same as she was. It all changed in 1949 when the new governor of Tennessee was appointed. Gordon Browning took office and Tann started to lose her uppermost connections. In September of the next year after his election of 1950, Brown had a press conference where he revealed all of Tann's schemes. Unfortunately, Tann would never pay for any of these crimes because just 3 days after that press conference, she passed away after slipping into a coma from untreated uterine cancer. Very quickly, in the reigning September, October, and November and December of that year, the remaining children in the home were found new adoptees, and the doors of the Tennessee Children's Home Society closed forever. No one was ever prosecuted for their role in the Georgia Tann adoption scandal. In fact, Tennessee legislature sealed all adoption records, some say in an effort to protect those of the higher-ups who had helped Georgia maintain her black market trafficking for all those years. This meant that any children who were adopted through Georgia Tann would have to have a court order and pay a fine to release their birth records. What people may forget to realize that is in the modern day, some 70 years after this scandal came to a close, survivors of the Tennessee Children's Home Society are still being affected. As the adoptees reach adulthood, they may become curious about where they came from and make efforts to forge connections with family they didn't know they had. Many have met siblings, aunts, uncles, and found a new hope, a new joy in going forward from all the travesties that Georgia Tann committed. Many are proud and honored to be part of the families they grew up in, happy with the lives they lead, and don't feel a need to see where they come from. In 2019, Lisa Wingate, the author of Before We Were Yours, a fictionalized account of the Georgia Tann scandal, came together to write about 15 survivors who are now in the modern day seeking out their families, seeking out one another, and stepping forward together, bringing something positive to what came from the Tennessee Children's Home Society. There is a small memorial in Elmwood Cemetery that serves to honor the children whose lives were lost at the hands of Georgia Tann and whose bodies were never recovered. The building where the Tennessee Children's Home Society housed all of these children that went in and out of its doors has since been demolished, which many feel is a fitting way to say goodbye to that chapter in our history and move forward. If you want to learn more about the Georgia Tann adoption scandal and the Tennessee Children's Home Society, try reading these books. The first is Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. This is a fictionalized account through the eyes of a child going through the Georgia Tann system. It has received incredible reviews and spurred the completion of another book by Lisa Wingate and Judy Chirstie, Before and After, sharing the stories of 15 survivors and how their families are coming together and growing again after all this time has passed. Both books are truly fantastic reads, and I hope you will check them out. Finally, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment below, and tune in next Friday for episode 2. This first season of Nonfiction Fridays is experimental. There will be 8 episodes, and if you did like it, be sure to respond and let me know so that I can determine if there will be a season 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.